And our two presenters are Rudy Leon and Duncan Aldrich. Rudy is the Outreach and Instructional Librarian at the University of Las Vegas in Reno. Rudy received her MS in LIS, Library Science, from the University of Illinois in 2004. Her research interests are in participatory learning, exploring new roles for libraries, and the roles and impacts of technology on pedagogy and learning. Before coming to UNR this year, she was a Learning Commons librarian and technology training librarian at the University of Illinois. Duncan Aldrich. Duncan has a very sexy title of @1 Administrator at ULV Reno. Duncan has a BA and MA in History and received his MLIS from the University of Oklahoma in 1985. He started work at the University of Nevada, Reno libraries in 1986.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you all for joining Rudy and me. For Rudy and me, this is our first CCUMC conference in any way. So far we've found it, it's a lot of fun. You guys are fun. Sometime maybe more fun than ALA. I'm not sure. How many of you are librarians? Oh, I didn't really mean that last one. Okay, so ALA is way more fun. Because media seems to be a prominent part of CCUMC, Rudy and I decided to kick off our presentation showing a video presentation that most of you might find familiar. We bring it in because actually in a conversation we had, it came up and that kind of spun into our presentation today, so it makes sense that we show the media. Let's go, Rudy.
I forgot to ask if we have audio.
And while we work on the
Well, at least
audio,
it's subtitled, right? Well, a little bit less.
Enkelt så hadde jeg jo ikke tilkalt helpdesk, hadde jeg vel?
Nei, det er sant.
Nei. Vil du ha en kopp vann på den?
Nei da, det skal være fort gjort.
Ja.
Skal vi se. Du bare gjør der. Sånn.
Ja.
Da er du i gang.
Ja, altså så langt kom jeg også.
Ok.
Ikke sant? Men så stoppet det opp, og så var jeg redd for at noe av teksten skulle forsvinne, så jeg turte ikke å gå videre.
Åja, ok. Nei, men du skjønner at inni her så ligger det kanskje flere hundre sider med lagret tekst. Så for å komme videre så tar du tak i et ark på den måten her, og så liksom blar du over på neste side sånn. Da fortsetter teksten der.
Jeg blar, altså.
Du blar, ja.
Men når jeg skal tilbake da?
Ja, da bare blar du tilbake igjen. Tar tak der, og så gjør du sånn. Der, så er du tilbake til den teksten du hadde sa. Ikke noe
Ok, så den slutter der,
Ja.
og så fortsetter den der, ja. Ok, men når jeg skal avslutte for dagen, hva gjør jeg da?
Da bare slår du sammen permene
Ja?
på den måten der. Sånn. Da er den lukket, da ligger alt lagret inni der.
Altså, jeg risikerer ikke å miste noe av teksten her nå,
Nei,
altså.
alt ligger lagret inni her nå.
Ja.
Da må du i tilfelle sette fyr på hele greia. Det er kanskje lite sannsynlig. Så.
Ja, ok. Nei, men for det er noe med det at liksom, når du har holdt på med skriftruller,
Ja.
så tar det litt grann tid å konvertere til å bla i en.
It's a little longer, but you get the idea.
yeah, and it actually may have a little more humor than our presentation. How many of you have seen that before? Is it still fun? Yeah. How many of you know German? So okay, were they honest in their translations? I hope so, more or less. Okay. Anyway, like I said, that we had talked about this video in the context of a conversation we were having that brings us to today's presentation, and there's really three things in there that are major points that will come out in our talk today. And the first is kind of a big picture point, and it's the most obvious point, is what are we discussing here? We're discussing change. Interesting that both presentations bring change into it as a major part. But the change that we're looking at is that not only is there change in the historical sense, when we look back in the past, we can all relate to what we're doing today, of course, with the change from the scroll to the book. And it almost seems natural when you look at it with hindsight. It just, it's progressed, it's history, it's what happened then, and obviously it happened then. Whereas in the present, when we go through change, we don't necessarily know what the consequences of those changes are going to be. And I bring that in because it's an odd mix to be talking about makerspaces and libraries, perhaps. And it may be that 5 years from now, when we look back in hindsight, we might say, well, yeah, hey, that was a pretty insightful thought that we had, that we brought to the CCUMC conference. Or it may just totally have gone away, and it was fun to think about, and we had a great time in Las Vegas. The second point is a lot more specific, and that is the location. You guys all raised your hands, or most of you did, you're librarians. You can see the study space, the old table, the sort of dim lights. So part of the second item is the location and the study area, the scholar doing his work. The second part of that is the assistant, or the, what would we call them? A public services librarian or professional. IT people might call him the what? The help desk guy. So the second part, the second item I'm bringing in from the video is that dual context of location and assistance. And the third part is really just the conversation that Rudy and I had that led us to the presentation today. Sort of the sort of conversation we tend to have where I ask Rudy to explain to me again, Rudy, why is it that, or how is it that Google and the internet are good for libraries and not destroying libraries? And of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I like to use Google myself. But during one of those conversations, we somehow started talking about makerspaces. And, sort of initially we said makerspaces in libraries because some of that's going on. And then it kind of became more of a conversation about libraries as makerspaces. And it was, of course, Rudy, who's the younger person in the screen up there, who was coming up with some real good zingers about libraries as makerspace. So hence we're here today, and I'm just going to talk for a couple of more minutes about makerspaces and libraries before I turn it over to Rudy and I'm putting her on the spot, to come up with the zingers. How many of you have actually visited a makerspace? So what are you librarians doing? My goodness. How many of you have any idea at all what a makerspace is? Okay, you that's holding your hand up really high, what is a makerspace?
Well, the ones that I've seen or read about are primarily places where people can come and use a set of shared tools that are available to them to bring to life ideas that they have, usually tech ideas, but it doesn't have to be construction, wood, whatever they want to be. It's a good place to come and just make things happen.
Okay, so now that Rudy got out there, did everybody pretty much hear that? A place that they can go that has tools. I found that an interesting description where people can make things happen. I'd also add to that there's a certain amount of expertise, because the people who have put that space together, the kind of tools he's talking about are things like jigsaws, the big stand-up drill presses that we can't afford as individuals to have at home. Could include some things like 3D printers. How many of you have 3D printers in your library? All right, I love it. That's great. At least there's one other or a couple of others of us. Okay, I think of it as, how many of you took shop in school? Oh, wow, I'm impressed. I took printing shop, wood shop, and metal shop in my junior high school program years ago, and loved it. And what did I have? A space where there were tools that we didn't have at home, and an expert up front showing us how to make cutting boards that look like pigs or cows or things like that. Okay, so that's Makerspace. Oh, boy, you're all librarians. I thought I'd get a bunch of media people here. What is the concept of a traditional library when you think of the library? What do, and don't young people answer this, old people answer this. What is the library? Somebody. Okay. Egalitarian resource for learning. I love it. I call it non-denominational when I think of the academic units on campuses. The ones that have labs that they don't let other students use who aren't majors is we're interdenominational or non-denominational. That's a good answer. I think of it as like the old guy. I mean, when I went to school, guys, 1970 to 74 to 75, 71 to 75, we were like the old reading room in a library or whatnot. Rudy's looking at me like I'm running out of time, so I'll just bug you guys a little bit describing what the more, see, I'm talking about my library now, so I'm going to say, you know, the modern library, the place you want to work, a place that's great to work. We opened the UNR Knowledge Center in Reno in 2008, and it was a really fun place to move into from the library. What was that, 72 or 3 that I heard you mention? Our old library was opened in 73, so it was like we died and went to heaven. But I'm just really quickly going to describe the middle picture is the big atrium that's on the 2nd floor of the library where the main entrance is, and that floor and the 3 floors above it are very much the traditional library. There's a reference desk, a little bit different. We have the computing help desk in there as well. But the top 3 floors are stacks with study tables. Of course, there's a lot of power up there for laptops, and the whole thing is wireless. But that's the more traditional part of the library. The 2 newer oriented parts of the library that get us into more makerspace ideas are the @1 area. And the @1 area has, we have 90 PCs and 25 Macs. The Macs are high-end Mac Pros with stuff like iMedia, Final Cut Pro, GarageBand. In the Dynamic Media Lab, which is where that video editing software is, we also have a sound recording booth where people make podcasts. They do music, they do narrative overlays for videos that they're editing. One guy was in there with a ukulele. I mean, we just had all kinds of stuff going on in there. Over here, right beside me, is one of the collaborative workspaces where you can plug, not a very good picture because only one person is collaborating with themselves. But you can plug in a laptop into that big screen, you know, work on a PowerPoint or whatever it is you're working on. And behind that you can see, I think that's Kari, one of our student assistants who's now a letter of appointment librarian. That's the Multimedia Center. We have we actually have some 16 millimeter, a lot of VHS and about 5,000 DVDs. And right next door to that is our equipment checkout center where we check out high-end video cameras, you know, just regular cameras, lighting kits, tripods, laptops, just a whole barrage of things. And really quickly, because I am running out of time, on the, right above that, and this is where I do a lot of my work, is we have 2 60-inch Designjet printers. You know, when I explain to old faculty who go, well, why don't you have people writing papers? You know, it's the Confucius thing, what one picture tells 1,000 words or whatever. And that's actually a good example of a poster right there. We printed out something like 60,000 linear feet of artwork posters. You can put canvas on these machines and all kinds of neat stuff. The far side is our science library, and about a year and a half ago we hired a physics PhD who's In my mind, he's a good friend, but he's a little bit crazy. And he likes to try, does that sound fair? Okay.
He's good crazy.
He likes to do strange and interesting things. So he's painted most of the walls in the science library with whiteboard. So if we get back there, we can see some of those. In fact, one of those says, why don't you paint whiteboard walls in the main library? And they've just gotten rid of, there's no books in the science library anymore. Where are the books? The books are in Mars. And what I mean by that is Mars is the Mathewson automated retrieval system. And so, you know, it's one of the robotic things. If you've seen the UNLV library, it's much like that. But he just has opened it up for group study space, and the kids love it. Usually on those whiteboards, you'll find DNA helixes drawn, equations and whatnot. And they also display things that people make. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Rudy to explain what that boat is. Thank you.
So this boat is fascinating. It is a concrete canoe, which is something that I had never heard of before I moved to Nevada, where we won the National Concrete Canoe Competition this year. There's engineers who make canoes out of concrete, and they float, which defies physics as far as this humanities person can tell. And the students who built that are huge fans of the engineering library, and so we, they carried their concrete canoe across campus and left it on display in the engineering library. So that's another piece of the way our libraries get used by our students is we have fans. Actually, the De La Mare Science and Engineering Library has a huge fan base. When they, their Facebook activity is absolutely spectacular. Their students love them and their responsiveness to their needs. So this picture, I mean, we have a pretty traditional library, but we do things really, really differently. And I love that Duncan likes to set himself up as a straw man with why is Google good for the internet? He runs this space. I mean, not the science library, but he manages the space where we have a green screen, where we have 3D photography, where we have all of that technology that can be checked out. And he was part of the planning team that built a building to be at the, what was the phrase, at the intersection of knowledge and innovation. So he's such a straw man in this case because he's part of that team rethinking what is a library and what should it look like and how should it respond to student needs. So let's see if I know how to use this. No, wrong way. Pardon? Okay. So my question, the first question is, what is a library? And from its origins, it's the ancient heart of campus. It's the place where all of the knowledge was held, so all of the scholars came to interact with the knowledge together. And universities built up around the idea of scholars interacting with accumulated knowledge. And that tends to be the history that I think locks us in place, that we think of libraries as the place where the books live, because we've always had where all the books live. But it's where the scholars came together in purpose-built spaces to access information that had been collected and made accessible and use it together in a place that had been built for that purpose. So yeah, okay, we warehouse books and we kept them safe. We made them accessible. We got together what the scholars needed. We provided a place for the scholars to work together with lighting and tools and all of these things that people needed to do their research. And the libraries have always done that. And that's something that, that sort of drives this talk, just thinking about what have libraries always done. And I came here from the University of Illinois, which is a very traditional library that has, in its heart of hearts, this mission of being the place where all the books live, and an uncomfortable relationship with the future as that becomes a more difficult challenge to be the place where all the books live. So coming to a building purpose-built to be at the intersection of knowledge and innovation has been a very interesting exercise for my shifts in vision and shifts in perspective. So that perspective, making that transition and reading a lot of Howard Rheingold and John Seeley Brown and John Paul Gee, I left somebody, Henry Jenkins. They have been dancing around in my head for the last 6 months since I moved to Reno, making all of these connections, and there's no list of citations. I just feel kind of infused with them. And when I look at our spaces, They are who I'm thinking through the lens of, through this participatory learning, through purpose-built spaces. And when I look at how our spaces are used, it makes me wonder, what is a library? So what do you guys see when you look at this? Collaboration. Are they all in a library? Okay, so we have 3 groups of people working together in 3 different environments with 3 different sets of tools to accomplish their intellectual or course-driven needs. I gotta tell you, these guys, this is a hackerspace. That's not a library. It's impossible to tell. That's our science and engineering library, where the students are working with computers and writing on whiteboards together, where librarians responded to a heard need and started working on it. This is down in Duncan's At One space, a bunch of students, and this was the only picture I could find of our students working with books. So that was not like a picture that I took. I went through all of our Flickr stream, desperately trying to find a picture of our students working with books. But they're just doing the same thing. And then I went out to look for a picture of a hackerspace and was so struck. It's the same thing. They have different tools. They don't have books. They have technology that I can't tell you what it is, because that's not the way, those aren't the toys that I go to play with when I go to express my curiosity. But putting these 3 together really got me thinking about what is a library and what is the role of the purpose-built space. So the middle thing? On the side. Yay, okay. So Makerspace. I will admit that I've actually not been to a Makerspace, although we have a couple of them in town. We have a couple of librarians who work at the engineering library who have connections to our hackerspaces in town. But I've been doing a lot of reading about them and thinking about the ethos of the Makerspace. Those of you who are familiar with them, tell me if I've missed anything. But it's about bringing an idea and following it through. It's building your own expertise. It's, ooh, don't look. Oh, okay. So building your expertise, building something new, seeking help and expertise that you don't otherwise have, and access to resources that you don't have in any other way. And it's about doing it yourself. It's about creating something with the help of your community, making something new. You may be making something new that exists in the world, but you'd never made it before. It didn't exist before you put the pieces together and had this concrete thing. What's the ethos of a library? You bring an idea and you follow it through. You have your curiosity. You go on your search. You find your book. You find your article. You develop your own knowledge and expertise as you do that. You create new knowledge. It may not be new to the universe, but it's new to you that you put 2 thoughts together and came up with something new, or that you developed a deeper understanding that's creating something new. You seek the help and expertise, we hope, of the professionals who are there to help you with all of the tools and resources available. And you have access to resources that are otherwise hard to find. All of our databases, all the things we pay for, all of the technology, the internet, the spaces that we have. And it's about doing it yourself. The folks who want to buy a term paper aren't doing that in the library. They're in the library to write their term paper. They're doing it themselves. These ethos, I don't know the plural of ethos, they are remarkably parallel. So yes, we have always been the warehouse for books, but when you start thinking about what is it that we have also always done and why do people always come to us, it looks shockingly like a makerspace. So, is this who we are? Are we the gorgeous reading room at the New York Public Library? Are we the stacks of books? Well, it seems in some ways, after everything I've been saying, no. Maybe we shouldn't be that. Maybe that's too boring. But these are purpose-built spaces for people to do their work with the tools and resources that they need to accomplish that. This is what libraries are. It's what libraries have always been. But it's more than we're used to thinking about. If you start thinking about all the services, all the purpose-built stuff, all the stuff that Carlton and Desi have been exploring. I mean, they're doing this very deliberate approach to purpose building for the future. We've always done it. We just maybe haven't hired anthropologists to help us do it better and better and better and more completely. Now, how about this? Is this who we are? This is a little bit more challenging sometimes to sell to our deans and our provosts and our funding agencies, that we're study halls and computer labs. But our students, does anyone not see their students using them as study halls and computer labs? That's what they need. But again, purpose-built spaces. They can go to the student union, they can go to the Starbucks, they can go to their dorm, they can go to their living room. Why do they come to the library? They have computers, they have internet, they're coming to purpose-built spaces to take advantage of all of those same resources because it's connecting the information with the people who use it in spaces designed to make that fantastic. The building that Duncan and I work in is spectacular. It is a glorious thing. The library at the University of Illinois was not built in 1973. It was built before 1873, and my office was 2 stories underground. So I glory in the space that I work in now. There is one small error in design. In the @1 area, which we had wanted to have as a 24-hour space, they built tables with little low carrel walls to put the computers in. And that is the one design flaw in the building, is realizing that students need tables like these without those walls to spread out. It's a study hall, but it's a study hall with the resources, with the people where they can come together and use it as they need. Purpose-built spaces. How about this? Is this who we are? I kind of think this is all of it. This is us all together. So up in the top corner, we have our engineering library showing off the inside of a 3D printer. We have 2 of them. It's very exciting. And here we have a student watching something be printed in the bottom corner. The computer screen there, that is all of the software available in the @1 floor on one computer screen. That's a lot of software. We provide that only on that one floor. Some of those are provided in other spaces throughout the library, but that's another purpose-built space that we have paid for that software and have that made available so that students don't have to go out and buy Final Cut Pro to learn how to make a video and decide if they want to use it. So the picture in the middle of the students studying around a table, I had to get that off Flickr Commons because I couldn't find another picture of our students studying together with books. But they do that in our library. We just don't take any pictures of them doing it. So, but again, purpose-built space, lots of light, people working together on a surface big enough for them all to get around and do that. And then it's also about creativity. So when our building was first built, and I was not there, a bunch of our library staff got together and put on a play in our enormous, wonderful theater. A science fiction play built by a local novelist in the 1800s, in the early 1800s. So that's library staff. The former dean is in that picture, and our development officer, using their creativity to express some of the wonderfulness of the space in which we live and in which we work. And so for me, this really encompasses the library, and it's hard to draw the line once I shift my vision between that and a makerspace. And it makes it harder to not see the future of libraries. The future of libraries doesn't feel so scary and fraught with just that little shift in perspective, that seeing the parallels with the makerspace, that as long as we continue to provide purpose-built environments to connect the scholars and the users with the resources that they need and the tools that they need to access it, we continue to have a really viable future that is actually really exciting instead of what are we going to do when there aren't any more books and Google has everything. We still have all of this role. So to bring it back, they have that same ethos that we were talking about before, that putting it all together on one slide. Libraries and makerspaces are about exploring your creativity using tools and resources and expertise that you do not otherwise have available to you without the support of those communities. And it's about doing it yourself, leaning on yourself, and having others available to be leaned on as need be. I guess I have to go back to my computer to run this, but I'll hand this over to Duncan. And I have no idea how we are in time. Okay. Okay.
One thing I didn't mention is that in the area where we check out the equipment, all kinds of equipment, behind that are the offices of the campus videographer, photographers. We have a really wonderful studio for a photography studio in the back of our building. We actually had one of the producers of, Avatar was one of the first 3D movies, who came to speak, walked into our studio and said, I could have done it here if it were bigger. But he said it was just a great studio. So Anyway, Mark Gandolfo, who's the head of that unit, put together, again, with this crazy equipment that they have and even check out. There's this equipment that has a big arm that spins around and goes back and forth, and you put a time-lapse camera on it. So the video that we're hopefully about to see was taken using that equipment, and of the @ONE help desk area, and it's a lot of fun. And you're going to maybe have to take me on faith. So as they're working on that, I guess I'll go ahead and open it up for questions or answers, you know, either way.
I want the real answer.
The question is why @ONE? When we moved into the building, we at that time saw this as the technology area, media area and whatnot, and he said he wanted to call it @ because of the @ sign, you know, and our email addresses and that. At that time, you know, 4 years ago, high technology. Those of us who were actually setting things up, they said, well, you can't say, hey, let's meet @ So somebody said, well, let's call it 4-1 or something. And somebody, actually the guy who at that time was in the library, in the library assistant's office, said, he walked up, he wrote @ 1, and then somebody else took the next step. Now, what our official stuff says is that it's because it's a one-stop shop. The question is, how do we keep our staff trained on all the equipment and software that they need to help others use? And the answer is we don't. Okay, we do as much as we can. We do have some specialists. The equipment checkout area there's a wonderful guy named Frank. And Frank he's almost like the equipment Nazi. He won't let anybody check a camera out unless he's trained them on it. And actually, because our business is just going crazy, the amount of media that's being created is alternative assignments. And I say alternative. Anybody else was in college when everything you had to do was an 8 to 12 page paper? Yeah. And so it's cool. So we have student assistants at the desk right there. In fact, 3 of my staff were students at that desk. And I have to turn to them to say, hey, somebody wants to flip a color photo in Photoshop to grayscale. I actually know how to do that, but a lot of things I don't know how to do. So we turn to the student assistants. And one thing we kind of pride ourselves in is the knowledge that student assistants working in the area. Oh, here you go. Look at that, not me. This is finally got the video going. But we actually initially when we opened had other librarians coming down to help out, and most of them kind of gravitated away because there was too much to learn, and every time a question came up they had to go to the student assistant, you know, you take over because I'm not sure what the question is. Yeah. Oh, okay. I think the person right here in the red shirt was first. Pardon? Okay, 16,000.
Actually, this year, 18.
Oh, I'm behind. 18,000. Okay, and we have 10 more minutes for questions. My goodness, yes.
At my university, we have a media center very much like yours. And what just really thrills me is how you manage to bring together like the videographer from the university photographer and maybe some departments and have them all together. Now, I think you probably had some buy-in issues along the way, or no? Were they willing to move to the basement?
Just, well, you know, but it's the first floor. It's not the basement. It's the first floor. And there's actually an entrance on one corner, comes in from sort of down a hillside through a sculpture garden, which is really cool. But a little history on that. When we moved in, IT, libraries, and TLT, which is Teaching and Learning Technologies, were all under the same VP, who was Steve Zink, who was initially Dean of Libraries before he became VP for IT services and whatever the actual title was. And TLT at that time was an IT unit. Steve has moved on. He's now with the Chancellor's office in Nevada. And they reorganized, so TLT is now a library unit, reporting to our new Dean of the Libraries. So we get along really well, or we get beaten. That's a joke, but anyway, so it was a little bit of a transition, and I'll just be honest, because you guys are librarians. We love to give everybody everything, and Frank, that I mentioned, our wonderful equipment Nazi, he's a wonderful guy, but he owns that equipment. You know, he says, somebody broke my camera, and that was kind of more the TLT side of stuff, so we've had to work to kind of come to some understanding. Instructional design, by the way, is also in the building, but further upstairs.
And
Yeah.
classroom management, so the technology in the classrooms is also part of Frank's domain.
That, and I'm going to say that I think in our science, engineering, physics library, that, in fact, the physics library was in the physics building. And it was combined when we took the oldest building on campus and totally renovated it to create the centralized science library. And it didn't get much business at all. It was just books. I mean, that's basically what the building was. So my kind of zany friend, Todd, who is now the science librarian, as I said, has his PhD in physics. He loves students. I mean, I have never seen, that's my favorite thing is public service, seeing a student go, I got it. Todd he's like twice further into that than I am. So the students love it there. The faculty kind of started coming over and going, why do they love it here? And since he's the PhD in physics, he can talk to them. Whereas our other science librarians I have my degree in history. I was never the science librarian, but the other science librarians were kind of not scientists, really. So it works really well. Yeah?
I'm really interested here as a PhD science librarian who just hired a PhD in communication design librarian with science librarians and also so we're headed down that path. I'm more excited to hear this.
All right. That sounds really great. Right here.
Oh, it's a technical question. You guys have math lab, you do video production. What do you guys do about the students storing their projects? Do you let them store locally? Do you have shared storage space?
Okay, the question is for the video production and things in our dynamic media lab, what sort of storage do we have for students? And I'm going to say that we have about 5 minutes, okay. I have two answers to that because one of my biggest bugaboos that I mentioned at the breakfast this morning is we do not have a general student storage system. So when the power goes out, they lose, and it's just, I've pleaded, I've done research. I mean, I'm pretty good with technology, but I say, here, this should work, that they can, the work will automatically get saved to the thaw drive on our deep freeze system on the computers, but IT just isn't going in that direction. Okay, so that's one side of it. The other side, for the Dynamic Media Lab, we have, I think it's a 42 terabyte XAN storage that's linked to from each of the Macs in there with a fiber optic. And we've timed it. It actually writes faster to the SAN that's like, 100 yards down the hall than it does to the hard drive on the Mac. So.
We're switching to a service like that.
Uh-huh.
What we're trying to figure out is policies on, wiping, how long for the first semester, and then, do we have any?
Can you move closer so you can record what she's saying?
Okay.
Do you have any kind of disclaimer for if your system goes down, how often do you wipe it, that kind of stuff?
There's two answers to that question. Yes, we have. I don't know. I'm not sure about the disclaimer. Okay. But I do know that we say that at the end of every semester, we'll wipe the drive within 2 weeks. I'm not sure we ever actually have because it hasn't filled up. Well, it has filled up. When it fills up, we've got about 3 videographers and 2 photographers on staff. Those are the guys that are filling up the stuff. But yeah, so we do have some policies. If you want, feel free to contact me and I'll get you in touch with Mark, who's the campus videographer, who set up that wonderful system. Okay? One more question? Okay. Yes?
For your things like your large format printer and your 3D printing,
Is it self-serve, the students can come up and do it, or do your staff intervene with that?
Yeah, the question is, when students are printing posters, does the staff intervene? Yes. We have, on all 90 of our workstations, our PCs, and of course on the Macs as well, we do have the CS6 suite, so they can use Photoshop. We tend to encourage students who don't know what they're doing to use PowerPoint to do posters. And then either bring it on a thumb drive, a CD, or just email it to yourself. And then they come over, and we have, the screens on both sides of the desk so that they can actually log into their email, download it, plug in their thumb drive. And then our student assistants who are, if they are not already, they become really proficient with the software. That's what they do for 20 hours a week that they work. And so they'll do things like say, if we blow that up, it's going to pixelate, and they'll work with them on strategies. Say, oh, it was a thumbnail on the web. Sorry, we're not going to be able to help you. There's nothing you can do. Yes, it is intermediated. We tell students we guarantee overnight printout. Usually we get them done within an hour or so. And we will just give them an estimate of when it'll be done. We had thought of having it just sent to the printer, but we didn't at that time figure out how to put the what is that, Omega scanner to read their cards, to debit the cards. And we do have a policy, getting back to policies, that if our printer scatters ink on your poster, we'll reprint it. But if you realize you have a typo in your name, we're gonna charge you again. We charge, it's about $6.50 a linear foot. So it's 5 foot wide. So they're paying for a 48 by 36 inch poster about $18. So it's a really good price. And I think we're out of time. Thank you guys.